Today's talk is with Manish Goel, a technologist, a venture capitalist, a husband, a change maker, and now the CEO co founder of TrustSphere, a relationship analytics company. In this first part of a two-part conversation, Manish shares the environment that helped him become a high performer, the signals he sends, and the output matrix leaders could use to identify a high performer. Welcome, Manish. Let's talk about people to profits. Profits are important, financials are important. That's the way we are evaluated when it comes to enterprise success. At the same time, all of us intuitively understand that people are important, but unfortunately, we don't have empirical evidence or analytical evidence that we can put in front of a board meeting, or we could put in front of some of the decision makers to help them take objective decisions. And all my conversations with you, even the way you started TrustSphere, makes me believe this is something you have also been thinking quite deep.
Thinking deeply about, but also hoping that actually that the actual discussion starts to change in boardrooms, because we think about people to profits, and I think you've got it the right way around. It's not just about profits; it's about people first, then profits, because that's how you. It's got to be that journey. It can't be the other way around.
Awesome, great. So why don't we start with you, right? Maybe like
Yeah.
you started your journey. Any aha moments, any gifts, any things that helped you realize your potential, or maybe people around you that helped you realize your gifts and helped you climb up.
Look, from my side, it's this. I think if there's something that really helped me understand, sort of to build my own capabilities, it was strong mentors. Strong mentors I started my career with PwC. In fact, it was really interesting. I was the when back in the years when consulting wasn't that big. I was the first person that was brought into PwC's consulting business at a time when they weren't hiring lots of people. And interestingly enough, I had a very strong female mentor who brought me into the organization, and she helped me actually understand the organization. So I was one. The practice at that stage was 50 or 100 people, so it wasn't that big in the practice that I was part of. But I was brought in as a special case, right, as an experiment. And I had a very strong female mentor who helped me and worked with me to better understand. I mean, obviously networks, but also my capability within the organization. But from there, I built a number of really interesting mentors within the organization who supported me on a number of different trajectories. And I think this is important as part of what defines the way I like to help all men. Now that I'm a mentor to people, I help them work. It's around helping them to experiment, giving them the ability and the latitude to make mistakes where they're doing things. So it's almost like the ability to to test out or experiment with a particular area that they're building, without the fear or the repercussions of failure. Because as an individual or as innovators, I'm jumping around a bit, but as innovators, we have to experiment. And being when your mentors or when your leaders in a practice, one that's growing fast, give you the latitude to experiment, it does two things. One, you come across areas you come across areas of innovation which you wouldn't have otherwise. But secondly, it builds confidence in you as an individual to understand where you build, where you double down on particular projects, where you cut particular projects, where you actually start to you bring other people in. Also, that ability and latitude to experiment means that you necessarily need to collaborate with other colleagues. So, in some ways, if you think of if I think back in my career, what really helped me, or what shaped me and formed me in terms of what I have, it's that ability to actually have strong mentors, diverse mentors, interestingly enough, but also the ability to then be given the latitude to experiment in a growing business.
Lots of mentors, diverse mentors who enabled you to experiment and build your confidence. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Correct.
I always believe it's a two-way street. A mentor encouraged you to do something, but there's something in Manish which also jumped out to do it.
So yeah, I mean, look, my even when I was much younger, this entrepreneurial spirit has been, what sits in my blood is wanting to change the world. I like the idea of, I'm not one of these big reform, I'm going to change the world entirely. But even if we change the world just a small bit, it can have profound impact. And I think that's part of what's always driven me. Like back even when I was young, we had clubs at university where I was always innovating as part of that. So it's kind of built. It's built into my DNA. The one other thing that's really important though is I've always recognized from the beginning that you don't do things in isolation. You can't innovate in isolation. So it's a matter of bringing teams along with you and collaborating. In that sense, I think what's driven me is the ability to actually then identify who those other teams, co-opt people to become part of that team, collaborate with them. But that also it depends whether they're more senior or more junior. It doesn't matter on different teams that you're building. But giving them then the same ability to you share your vision and you have them come along with you, or in fact take you sometimes in directions you don't think about it. So it's about, but also building diverse teams. It's been really important for me to build diverse teams around me, which are not just diverse in terms of representation, but also diverse from a cognitive perspective. And I jump onto when you think about startups have to have cognitive diversity. If you don't have cognitive diversity, what you end up doing is something which looks like it's going to be a good idea for a while, and then it fades off. You've got to continuously bring cognitive diversity, people who are willing to challenge what you're doing, people who are willing to actually say no, that's not the right way, rather than people who just simply agree and keep us driving over a cliff at some point.
Since many people walk away with different definitions of cognitive diversity, why don't we talk a little bit about your definition?
Yeah, cognitive diversity for me, it's look, from my side, it's not necessarily an IO psych definition. When I talk about cognitive diversity, it means people coming from different backgrounds, people coming from different disciplines, if you will, and people who have people who also, and this is where the psychology is. If you think of Myers-Briggs, you don't want everybody to have the same sort of profile. You want different people with different profiles who complement one another. And I think that's how, if you look at cognitive diversity, it's how I define it. It's a mix of different dimensions.
What is a matrix that you possibly use to measure your own success? Do you have a matrix?
So it's interesting. I think for me, if I look at a couple of things, obviously making money is one, but it's not my primary objective. It's an objective, but it's not the primary objective. I think for me, there's two or three things that are really important. One is being able to be innovative in what you bring through. So if we're I talked a little bit before about wanting to change the world, just tilt the axis just a little bit. Things that are what's important for me is that what we drive into the business, what we bring into an economy or into an organization, is the ability to drive real change. But second one's positive change. So ethics. Sometimes to my own peril, my ethics. I have a very strong sense of ethic in terms of doing the right thing. So if we're going to work on a piece of technology, if we're going to do something that's transformative, the ethics are very important as part of that. So change, but doing it in an ethical way is very important. And obviously, making money is important. There's no question about that.
You can't scale without money, so it definitely is an enabler. Like one of my very distant mentors when I was growing up became Bill Gates. When the first time when I heard about somebody from America is coming to India to eradicate polio, right? And I was young at that point, but you needed to be a billionaire to eradicate polio in a country which is the most populous country. So nothing against money, but it's how you use the money. Absolutely.
It's a resource, right? So you use the resource, but you apply it in a positive way. I think
I wanted to just pause for a second so we can reflect on the insights Manish has shared so far. To become a high performer, he says, surround yourself with cognitively diverse mentors and people. That is, people who think different. He also shares that one of the aspects of becoming a high performer is inculcating a habit of experimentation. Experiment a lot. Do something transformative and do it ethically.
So you got diverse mentors and you are innovative. You have a very strong, I guess, compass for ethics and clarity that you need money and resources to scale. So that's great. If we start flipping it a little bit and saying from an organization's perspective, what are some of these signals that a manager or a leader could take away to say, well, I could see now that I have enabled Manish enough to make him a high performer, right? Because what we are trying to do is, in the end, through these conversations, trying to see if there's a matrix, there's a dashboard, there's an analysis, there's an approach that we could share with the world on how you can make people higher performers, because then they're happier performers, and then eventually profits start growing in a company. So what signals did you send, or what signals do you look for?
If you look at an output metric on this, it's a great question, by the way. And by the way, this is the subject of a 2-hour bottle of wine discussion in itself. But let me try and summarize it. I think what gets it, for me, if there's an output metric for that, is the ability for individuals to operate independently and operate independently. But what that means is this: they have the confidence, they've built sufficient level of confidence, sufficient level of knowledge, sufficient level of network, of course, within an organization to be able to operate independently, effectively, if we talk about leverage, to be able to go off and do what they do, whether that's innovate or experiment, that have the capability to do that. In fact, one of the other output metrics I use for our own organization is when people leave an organization, are they more valuable once they've been in the organization? Do they go to places which are even bigger or even better than us, if you know what I mean? And I know we hate losing stuff. It's just a terrible thing. But by the same token, I think it's another really important output metric, because I have this notion, it's a strange notion, I guess, of stewardship. We're none of us are here forever. We're here to help build and develop the next generation, if you will. And in that sense, what I think is, when I say this to anyone that we hire, I want to make sure that when you leave the organization, which you will, you leave in a better way than when you came in. And developing individuals as part of that is another. It's a strange output metric, but it's a positive output metric for me, that they go off to do bigger and better things once they from when they came in. So developing them.
So you see it as a positive. Somebody left your organization to do better things. Is it a positive that you mentored them that well, or is it more like, I could have given an opportunity in my organization?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a curse in some ways, because you mentored them so well that they become really valuable and marketable in the marketplace. Look, I think it's this. Depending on the organization and the size of the organization, individuals, they have an opportunity to grow. You build them to the point where they can grow. But if they have potential to grow in either bigger organizations or in something different, right, where they can actually test their own limits. If they've tested the limits within our organization, then I think it's a positive thing for them to leave. Not that we want to leave. Not that we want people to leave. You know what I mean? You want to retain as long as you can. But the old song. If you love somebody, set them free. In some ways, with employees, it's a little bit the same. Once they've grown to their limit, you've got to set them free, and you have to celebrate the fact that they're going to do bigger things, bigger and better things. It's okay.
It's Richard Branson, I think he said it once, that you train them enough, empower them enough that they want to leave, but give them enough that they want to stay. Yeah, they want to stay.
Richard Branson has a slightly different checkbook checkbook than I have. So I can do the first two. The third one, it's a little bit more difficult. So.
We'll get there. It's a matter of time.
We'll get there. I agree with the sentiment.
Today's conversation was with Manish, the individual who became a high performer. He shares how a network of strong mentors, especially diverse mentors, shaped him and offered him the latitude to experiment. The ability to experiment further bolstered his confidence to understand where he could double down and where he had to let go. Through these experiments, Manish also developed a strong conviction to innovate and the intuition that innovation thrives through collaboration. Surround yourself with cognitively diverse people, that is, people with different ideas. Bring them along with you, and sometimes, who knows, they may even take you in directions you never anticipated. The personal matrix Manish likes to evaluate himself on is his ability to drive real and positive change. To do something transformative, it's also very important to be ethical. Finally, we talk about the signals he sent and signals leaders could look for in identifying high performers. First, is our ability to operate independently, skills, knowledge, and even the network to do what we do best. Second is our ability to experiment repeatedly. And third is our ability to collaborate with diverse thinkers because we can't innovate in isolation. When it comes to identifying a high performing leader, Manish talks about stewardship, the ability to develop our team. None of us is here forever. We are here to develop the next generation. So let's celebrate the fact that our employees left to do bigger and better things that we could not offer. Fascinating insights on becoming and identifying a top performer. Stay tuned to part 2 of our conversation with Manish when we'll come back and talk to the leader, be in consulting, in venture capitalism, or now as a CEO co founder of TrustSphere. I'm your host, Manisha Gupta. The title music is Ode to God by Chirag Bindal. Stay tuned to People to Profits because people make profits.